Good day, and welcome to the Foley's Hot Energy Topics, What to Expect in 2014 web conference call. Today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I'd like to turn the conference over to Jason Allen. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Jason Allen, partner and co-chair of Foley's Energy team. I'd like to welcome you to Foley's Energy Bootcamp Web Conference series discussing hot energy topics, what to expect in 2014. Today we're joined by one of my colleagues, Scott Klug, and special guest, Tom Hassenbohler, Chief Counsel to the Energy and Power Subcommittee of the U.S. House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee. First, I'd like to introduce Scott Klug, who's my co-host today for the web conference. Scott is a Public Affairs Director at Foley and co-chair of our Foley Client Service team. Scott's a former congressman who served for 8 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, and he's also a former Emmy Award-winning TV reporter. I'll turn it over to you, Scott.
Good. Thanks, Jason, and good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this presentation. We thought it'd be interesting to give all of you a sense of what's likely to happen in this sort of closing session of Congress. The House is out this week and next week on sort of a spring break, and then they come back with potentially a flurry of activity between now and the early part of August. Then they're off for a week, a quick session in the fall, then an election. So it's a pretty tight time window. But I think what we all expect is that next year, especially if Republicans take control of the Senate, it may be a very active early 2015. So we're fortunate to have Tom Hassenbohler with us on the phone today. Tom actually is the Chief Counsel for the Energy and Power Subcommittee. I served on the Energy and Commerce Committee for 6 of the 8 years I served in Congress. It's, along with the Ways and Means Committee, the two most powerful committees in the House. Tom started his career working for Joe Barton, who's a Republican congressman from Texas. Joe's still there. He represents the Dallas area. As the sort of chief counsel for the committee, Tom gets all kinds of contentious issues on his plate, including the Keystone pipeline and some of the EPA's greenhouse gas regulations. He understands the energy world well. He actually was a lobbyist earlier in his career for the American Natural Gas Alliance. And I can also tell you that he's a passionate LSU football fan, and when you try to reach him on a Saturdays, you're not going to have very much luck. So what we did is give Tom a list of about 8 topics we'd like to have him touch on. I suspect it'll take Tom 15 or 20 minutes to sort of run down the checklist, and then we wanted to leave another 25 minutes for questions. So Tom, welcome, and let me turn it over to you for sort of an early rundown on the key issues that you're going to have to deal with the rest of the spring and summer.
Sure thing. Thanks, Scott, and thanks for having me here and the introduction. Happy to chat a little bit about the big picture and where we see things going in the near term and the longer term, and you know, some of these issues that we deal with on a daily basis. Most of you are, I'm sure, aware that Congress hasn't been very productive lately, and you know, there's divided government is alive and well here in Washington, and the issues that we face on energy are, you know, facing the same kind of tough haul to get any kind of consensus. And I don't see a whole lot of that changing in the near term, but I do see some windows of opportunity going forward into 2015, and I can talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. But you know, there really hasn't been any kind of, you know, post the cap and trade debates and the failure for the Senate to pass the Waxman-Markey legislation. There hasn't been any major significant energy legislation that's blossomed through the House or the Senate. And I think what folks are trying to do here on all sides is really figure out where is the next big energy debate going to be. I mean, there's obviously the executive, through the Clean Air Act, there are several very aggressive measures underway to control greenhouse gases, part of the President's Climate Action Plan. But there's also a very robust change in energy, you know, happening in this country as part of, you know, the the boom in oil and gas production, and we face a very different energy future than what many of us thought in the last two major energy bills were passed out of Congress here, the EPA Act of '05 and the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007. So the world has changed. Politics have stayed the same on some levels, but have also changed. The House and the Senate are, there's some benefits to things not moving, and there's some problems with things not moving, and the new Congress, especially some of the new members here, are a very different kind of breed of politician than we've seen, even in the last decade, as many of you know, and so that factors on down to every issue, including energy policy. We don't do big sweeping, bills anymore, and many people are glad we don't do it that way. But there is certainly a lot to get done and a lot to modernize and update as we start to look at what the energy future holds, both looking at, from a climate perspective as the administration issues some of these regulations, and from an energy abundance perspective. So, we focus on, really what we've been focusing on is we try to divide it up into a few themes that the Energy and Commerce Committee, as Scott has jurisdiction over. We don't have jurisdiction over tax policy, that's Ways and Means, but we do have jurisdiction over energy policy generally and environmental policy generally. So that brings in line everything, all issues under the DOE, EPA, FERC, NRC, you name it. We've got we're the major authorizing committee for all of these agencies and more. But PHMSA, pipeline safety. I mean, we can go down the line. But what's been very current, folks are talking about Keystone, and we're talking about energy efficiency, and where there's, the themes from this Congress, if you've been following it all, are, what's going to happen with Keystone, what's going to happen with, there's a bill in the Senate, Portman-Shaheen, on energy efficiency that has been the rare beast that has actually formed some strong bipartisanship, and the House has also actually acted on energy efficiency. I can talk a little bit about that. We've also got, the EPA and the New Source Performance Standards, the Climate Action Plan, grid issues, and then exports are really part of our agenda. And we divide things up, sort of under 6 categories, and I'll just talk a little bit about each one. From a transmission and distribution infrastructure perspective, I deal with that in a comprehensive way, both oil, gas, electricity, transmission lines, pipelines. We are the committee that does, the federal policies for all these. What we're currently working on, this will get into Keystone a little bit, and sort of lessons learned from this process. I mean, as painful as it is, I think, politics aside, we get asked the question every day, is the president going to approve Keystone? And I'm done with making predictions. I don't think anyone wants to hear another prediction from any of us. What we've passed legislation in the House, as many of you will probably know, too many times to make this point. What we're working on now is how not to repeat the mistakes of the past. And so soon we'll be releasing a new draft of a bill called the North American Energy Infrastructure Act that will take a new look at how to amend the process for dealing with presidential permits for cross-border energy infrastructure. And what we're attempting to do in this bill is decouple the commodity authorization from the permitting infrastructure. The whole reason why the State Department has a say in Keystone is because of an executive order, or a series of executive orders that have been passed around from administration to administration. There's been a hole there that basically has not been filled by Congress. As another example, for natural gas pipelines or for electricity transmission lines, you have a different role. There's still a presidential permit process, but those are handled through statute or through agency expertise, both by the FERC as it relates to natural gas pipelines, and the DOE as it relates to electricity transmission lines. Just for for approving this infrastructure across the border of Canada or Mexico. And so what we're looking to do is sync up all three of those under a similar standard, to basically with the premise that the free flow of energy across North America looking forward, both from Canada and Mexico, is a good thing. And the infrastructure permitting, the environmental permitting side of it, the NEPA decisions and all those, are a different issue than the commodity approval, which is basically the only issue that the State Department has jurisdiction over right now. It's for actually allowing the commodity to get across the border. So we're writing a new piece of legislation that is bipartisan and that will hopefully change the debate going forward, that will be moving forward in this committee this year. And just as a caveat, the question, do we expect many of these bills to become law this year? No. But what we're doing is building a record. As you all know, it often takes years for new legislation to start to get across the finish line, and you need to start building the record of where we are, and what we've learned from sort of the new realities that we have in energy. And so on the transmission and distribution side, the cross-border permitting issue, both from Canada with, looking at oil sands issues in the past and the future, and looking at Mexico and where they're going with their energy development and their recent reforms. This bill is designed to deal with all of those issues in a holistic fashion. So we also are, another bucket two is the electricity generation portfolio, and trying to maintain a diverse electricity generation portfolio in a very turbulent time where, we have state RPSs and incentives and new ways of delivering energy, distributed generation and storage, and all kind of new, challenging the old, ways of delivering electricity to consumers. You've got so many different layers of change happening there, both from the market, from coal to gas, switching, regulations with the new source performance standards, and just the viability of nuclear going forward, both in the market and with still the uncertainty about nuclear waste. We try to approach this as comprehensively as we can. But in many ways, the issue on, is the federal government going to pass a renewable portfolio standard or an RPS? Is it going to pass comprehensive federal legislation to address GHGs? These issues have been debated for years, and they've never gone anywhere. And so I think most people have moved on, and they're now dealing with the states and letting the states be the laboratories of change here. And we're seeing the real-time cost and benefits to those policies, as we hear about all the time from our members and all across the country. There's good things happening in innovation and with grid and technology, and then there's real challenges with retirements and keeping the lights on. What our main focus as the Committee of Expertise is delivering electricity affordably and reliably to our constituents, and that involves all sides of it, industrial consumers as well as everybody in their lights on, just to keep their lights on in their house. So we've approached this issue very aggressively. We've had several hearings on electric gas coordination and renewables integration. We continue to monitor state activities and international activities, because obviously when you talk about climate, you have to look at the international developments. And certainly there's a lot of new developments happening in Europe that are causing a major rethink of some of the aggressive renewable policies that the Europeans, as well as the Australians, have been pursuing for the last decade or so. We anticipate a lot of that same debate to happen in the states, and eventually again it will rise up to the federal level. And at some point down the road, there'll need to be a compromise, and I don't think that dealing with CO2 and how it gets regulated, because as we all know, Massachusetts versus EPA is a very alive and well Supreme Court case, and I don't foresee any major change to that, even though the Supreme Court is currently reviewing whether the application of mobile sources can just automatically trigger a stationary source rule under the Clean Air Act. even if that gets a positive interpretation from the Supreme Court, I still don't see it changing a whole lot of the debate, to be honest. So moving on, I'll try to get through as much of this, and then we can have questions. Permitting, that's bucket 3. We talk about new energy resource and creating a manufacturing renaissance. How do we actually take advantage of that in a way that is that allows major new foreign direct investment and or plants that have been mothballed to come back to this country. I mean, we see announcements of $100 million or $100 billion, in new investments. But what we want to figure out is how to get those over the finish line, and a lot of that deals with federal permitting. And of course, our jurisdiction, while NEPA issues are handled, and timelines and figuring out agency accountability, Clean Air Act permitting is also a huge issue, and dealing with pre-construction permits, looking at issues of NAC standards coming online in the next couple of years, ozone, PM, GHGs under PSD obviously is causing a lot of uncertainty, and how the regions are figuring that out. So there's a lot of roadblocks to actually getting this manufacturing renaissance, making it a reality, and we're exploring that whole effort through legislation and through hearings. Another topic, LNG exports, as you've heard a lot about, we deal with sort of a new era of what this oil and gas boom has meant to the U.S. is the U.S. is I don't think the American public has fully woken up to this yet, but the U.S. is now once again an energy superpower, and the world's preeminent energy superpower. We are the #1 gas producer. We are with recent data, the #1 oil producer again. And so we have the technology, and we have the ability to produce and to deliver to our allies as well, a whole new source of this product, as well as benefit our domestic consumers and our manufacturers. So we've been exploring a whole new area of energy diplomacy. We've taken meetings. I will tell you, we have more meetings with the international community on this issue than I've seen on anything in energy. It's very exciting. Obviously, with the turmoil in Ukraine and Russia, this has been a big topic for liquefied natural gas exports, and we currently have a bill pending before the committee that would expedite the Department of Energy review process for the approvals of those, and we anticipate that to be moving very quickly through the committee and to the House floor. The Senate also has a companion piece, and there's efforts underway for that. Do we anticipate all these terminals to get built? No. Do we anticipate everything to go to the Europeans? No. There's a lot of this. We know a lot of this is going to go to the Asian markets and elsewhere. But the signal that it sends that the U.S. is becoming a major energy exporter, and to open up competition in the markets is very much a powerful signal that the Eastern Europeans, especially in the ones right around, centrally located around Russia, the Hungarians, Lithuanians, obviously the Ukraine folks, but the Czechs, they've all made a very impassioned plea for expedited review, and it really is resonating with a lot of these members. So that issue is coming, and then we talk about oil coming soon too. We're starting to do some analysis on oil exports. There's plenty. Obviously this is a different beast. Oil exports impacts every American when they look at their gasoline prices. There needs to be a serious amount of data before I think the political will reach a consensus to move on this issue. Although you have seen in the Senate, Senator Murkowski and Senator Landrieu recently do some requests to the Energy Information Administration on analysis and to build a record. Basically, this is going to be a data-driven debate, and we're doing similar things. But just to be clear, I don't anticipate the oil export issue to get really much attention other than on the sidelines until next year. And that has a lot to do with politics, but also a lot to do with just data and the need to do the research. Energy, so innovation and efficiencies. My other point. There's a lot of focus on energy efficiency. That always seems to be the sweet spot. I say that even in the House there is an agreement that energy efficiency is a good thing, and we have recently passed legislation that went under the radar for a lot of folks. The Energy Efficiency Improvement Act of 2014. We dealt with, some of the parameters that makes this go smoothly. As we had some parameters to focus on in order to sell it to our members, and it's, we have to show that these energy efficiency measures are saving taxpayer dollars. Our members don't like mandates, no cost. We're trying to limit the size and scope of the federal government to extent we can help the federal government be an enabler of new technologies and demonstrate new things, and we're encouraging that in our bill that we did a few weeks ago on the House floor. Dealt with a lot of things, both from the federal government perspective and also from the private sector perspective. We have a big interest in energy savings performance contracts, requiring some of these agencies to get with the program and actually taking better advantage of these things. We've passed some things on the energy efficiency things. We did a section on better buildings, a voluntary market-driven approach to commercial building owners and their tenants to reduce energy consumption. It established a Tenant Star program, a voluntary certification and recognition program similar to what, similar to the data that, or the labeling that the Energy Star program has done. And there's a few other measures on federal government energy efficiency, data centers, and commercial buildings that we did. So we're looking constantly at some ideas on that and how to make that, how to fit that within. There is a chance that you may have heard that the Senate will bring up again the Portman-Shaheen-Portman bill before the end of the next recess, so before, I guess, Memorial Day. And if that does happen, that may be the one opportunity that, if the Senate is able to get it across the finish line, which is a big if, meaning if it doesn't get bogged down with the more controversial amendments, Keystone, LNG, coal export, all NFPS, those types of things, then maybe there could be a shot at getting something across the finish line on efficiency this year. And if not, it may have to wait till after the election. And then finally, just the grid, and I know I had a few questions from you guys on how, who's going to pay for grid security. We had questions on the future of nuclear. Grid security has been a hot topic here, as you know, with the Metcalf, with both the physical security, the cyber security, EMP threats. We hear it all over here. We've got plenty of ideas on who can do what and which legislation should be advanced. I think our bottom line is, FERC and NERC already has the authority to address this, and FERC recently, on the physical security standards, directed NERC to issue an order within 90 days that they briefed us on last week, which we believe that NERC will meet that 90-day target, and they seem to be working in a comprehensive fashion with the utility sector, with the Department of Homeland Security, with the folks who are in charge of this, FERC, DOE, all the government agencies, in order to get something on the books that can actually deal with the physical security side of things. As you know, the cybersecurity side of things, there was a similar order that happened a few months ago, and the administration also has some executive orders. We're generally supportive of those. We're trying to monitor the situation as closely as possible to see where there may be some other holes that we can fill in legislatively. But obviously on these kind of issues, legislation is a heavy hurdle, and there is tendency to overreact or underreact on all sides, and we're trying to find the balance on the grid security things, with the ultimate recognition that consumers are going to have to pay for this, and we need to make sure that we address it and give it the right role that utilities are already looking at, but not overcompensating or undercompensating for it, because in the end, whether it's the PUCs, passing this along, or the investor in utilities, we're going to have to deal with this in addition to all the other suite of grid challenges that are facing the utility sector, meaning back to where we started earlier with the retirement of major baseload generation and new delivery methods, and state incentives. I mean, that's just it's quite a challenging time to be in the utility sector, and we know, our Fred Upton, our chairman, meets with the CEOs regularly, and we hear that from all of them. So there's a lot to do, a lot that we're doing. That's kind of all over the place, but just to give you a perspective of how much jurisdiction we have and how much we do, and happy to open it up to questions.
Tom, why don't you catch your breath for a minute? This is Scott Klug. I just want to spend a minute on tax extenders because I know we'll have some questions on that, and we're going to open it up for questions shortly. So, the idea originally was at the beginning of this session that there'd be comprehensive tax reform. Chairman Baucus in the Senate and Dave Camp in the House on the Ways and Means Committee, who actually is a classmate of mine. Dave and I were elected in '90 together. Thought we'd be able to get to a point where there'd actually be a comprehensive bill that would eliminate loopholes and drive down rates. Baucus left to become the new ambassador to China, and why tax reform was a long shot. Once he left, it just about killed and crashed it. So then the question gets to be what happens to comprehensive tax reform, and I think Camp's bill is interesting because now somebody's actually written out a plan that I think will become the basis of serious tax discussions that might happen next year, especially if Republicans take control of the Senate. And I think if you look at most political observation, most folks think, barring some strange twist, the Republicans should take control with maybe a 1 or 2 vote majority. So that may give some legs to it. So all those provisions in the Camp tax bill, which people hated and sort of breathed a sigh of relief when Dave announced he was going to retire, I think will still be on the table because you got to have one as a marker, which then raises the question, if it's not going to happen, what happens to tax extenders? So there's actually about 50 of them that expired at the end of 2013. If you look, the price tag, if you do all of those for 1 year, is $41 billion. So a lot of the savings that got negotiated in budget deals sort of go out the window if you do the tax cuts without paying for them. For example, there's $7 billion in 1 year over research and experimentation credits. And then on the energy side, there's $6 billion in renewable energy production, there's another $1 billion in biodiesel, and there's another $3 billion in energy tax provisions. The Senate actually talked about trying to deal with the tax extender bill before Memorial Day. But I have to tell you, my personal perspective on this is I think the House is not going to act until after Congress comes back after Labor Day. I know one of the things Camp would like to do is to make some of these permanent. For example, the renewable energy production tax credit, it's there, then it's out in 2000 and lapse, then it's back, then it's out in 2002, then it's back, then it lapses in 2004. And so the renewable energy sort of gets jerked around in all directions. And I think what Camp would like to do on a lot of these issues is provide some sort of certainty going forward. So there's sort of the quick 2 minutes on tax reform that I wanted to give you a general sense and give Tom a chance just to catch his breath. And now we're happy to open it up for questions, for Q&A.
If you'd like to ask a question, please signal by pressing *1 on your telephone keypad. If you're using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute button is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. A voice prompt on the phone line will indicate when your line is open. Please state your name before posing your question. Again, press *1 to ask a question, and we'll pause for just a moment to assemble our queue. Again, that is *1 to ask a question. At this time, we have no questions in the queue.
Okay, this is Scott. Why folks sort of get ready to ask. I've got a couple other things that Tom and I talked about earlier that he didn't get a chance to touch on. Tom, what's your sense in sort of the tension between the administration and Congress on new coal plants?
Well, real and I think shared. I think the administration is trying very hard to, show they have an all of the above strategy by moving forward with CCS requirement for new sources. And I think they, have very much tried to stretch the realities in a way that is going to be very, difficult to get any, I mean, it hasn't worked if they've thought that they would get, Republican support for, the future of coal to try to, be able to, actually mandate CCS technology. Somehow that will make it a reality. We've, one of the bills we passed was, Chairman Whitfield of the subcommittee and Senator Manchin of West Virginia, basically it's a bill that doesn't repeal CO2 under the Clean Air Act, but it's a bill that says you must demonstrate, adequately demonstrate the technology before you mandate it, and so it sets up a set of requirements for what the adequate demonstration actually means under Section 111 of the Clean Air Act. And there was a debate about whether or not it's available or not, and we've had administration officials that have testified differently than the party line. So it's real. The friction is real. It's going to become a major issue both for the election and into next year when they. The plan is to unveil the new source performance or the existing source performance standards, by June of this year, according to the Climate Action Plan, and that is a different beast as well, which is going to go out and try to figure out a way for states to be flexible and allow them to plan on, carbon reductions, that don't necessarily that are outside the fence, but most likely so they don't have an immediate impact on some of the generation, but in the end, we all know that this is where it's targeting. So it's a real problem. It's a live issue, and I think you're going to see all kind of different ways at going at it. This is basically the cap and trade debate, just going through the back door through the Clean Air Act. So.
And do you think they'll hit the June deadline?
I think they're pretty serious about it. Yeah, all indications are that they are going to try to issue this rule and keep to the schedule. So it's important for the longer term plan for those guys, and getting this done before the next administration, or at least trying to get as much of it done to where it's much harder to undo. So yes, I think they'll keep to the schedule.
Let me pause and ask the operator if we have any live questions.
Yes, we'll take our next question.
My question relates to the Keystone project. I live in Wyoming, and I'm in the energy field, and I don't get exactly great information out here. But my question is there any substantive discussion within the administration as to the pros and cons on the Keystone, or is it all utterly political?
Well, the substantive discussion, I think, ended with the release of the environmental impact assessment, the final one, which just happened in January or late January, I think it was now, which concluded for the third or fourth time that the impacts on the climate and on safety and deliverability of the product are, this has the least cumulative impact on the climate, especially when you compare it to other modes of transportation, and it is the safest way of delivering the product. So there's that's where the actual analysis ended, and so now the process is the coordinating agencies under NEPA have 90 days to respond to that State Department analysis. And then once that time frame is over, the decision squarely rests with the president. And so...
Is he political?
It is, well, that's the problem.
I'm teasing.
It's the presidential permit, which is why I started with the conversation saying this whole process needs to be updated to take the politics out. The process of the State Department even having this authority is driven by executive order, because there is no federal permitting agency for oil to come across the border. And so the State Department by default is basically the agency responsible for approving this. Even though they don't have jurisdiction over the actual physical siting of the line, they have jurisdiction over the approval of the commodity coming over, which has triggered a very different kind of NEPA than is usually required for federal pipelines. Pipelines are governed under state law. Oil pipelines, natural gas pipelines are governed under the Natural Gas Act. You have eminent domain authority for those. You don't have it for oil. So this whole process is really a unique situation that used to be apolitical, but because of the controversy with the oil sands, certain segments of the NGO community have found a way to make this what it is today, and both sides are responsible for overly politicizing it, and now we have a major problem. And not only do we have a Keystone problem, but we have a problem going forward with other lines that are going to need similar approvals. It's not just Keystone that we're talking about. These are safety issues. There's feeder lines that need to get approved. All of these things need presidential permits, and what's happening is everything is just getting either rerouted or on the sidelines, while rerouted via pipeline or truck or rail or ship, and the real implications of that going forward when we look into going south of the border are the same. So that's why we're looking at a way to reform the whole process and try to take the politics out, and that's going to be one of our major pieces of legislation that we build on both the rest of this year and next year.
Good. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Again, if you'd like to ask a question, that is star one. At this time, we have no questions in the queue.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for joining today. I really appreciate it, and I want to thank Tom for taking time out in his morning to take some time to touch on these issues. If there's any follow-up issues or questions you have that you ran out of time or think about when you get off the phone later today, feel free to reach out to me or to Jason, and we can pass those along to Tom. And again, Jason and the energy team at Foley are standing by to help you with issues you have, and if we can ever answer questions and help in Washington, we'd be delighted to do it. And Tom, again, thanks very much for your help, and enjoy the break next week when Congress is out.
Sure. Thanks for having me, and happy to do it. So y'all have a good day. Thanks.
Good luck, Tigers. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.